to see it. I'm really glad to see everybody. And we have so many people here. Gina in New York already says, thrilled to be here with all of you. And I can second and third and fourth that. I'm Jerry, and I am the web tech person for this evening. And Wendy Bale is above me on your screen, as you can see. Wendy is here to teach us to make feathers. So anybody who wants to like say hello, go ahead and give your where you are. Thank you for coming from all over.
This is awesome. Look at that.
No, look at this. Howdy from Texas, St. Augustine, Florida, and New Mexico. Oh my gosh.
Canada. And Tracy braved it from the UK. Yay.
This is fantastic. Tracy, you're here. It's so late there. Oh my gosh.
I think it's midnight there. Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, we'll try to keep you awake.
I know. Wow. We're all over the place.
Awesome.
So I wanted to just share my screen for a second before Wendy starts to say that this is one part of, thank you, Karina, also for the ancestral territories of the Duwamish people in Seattle. Very cool. I wanted to share the screen just to show you that this is part of our membership drive. The Guild of American Papercutters is open to anybody, basically, who is enthusiastic about cutting paper and paper work. And so this free workshop tonight by Wendy is part of the public events. Usually our workshops are about $29.75 for members, and they're usually 2 hours long, as this is. And they're kind of skill sharing events. For members, Crafty Hour is always free. Dues are, $40 a year, and that's a blanket no matter where you are in the world, and which is pretty low, I think, for most places. But if you're struggling, let us know. The workshops are, this workshop especially because we've got so many people here, is going to be a little bit more one-sided and kind of presentation oriented, although you'll get a lot of chance to cut. And Crafty Hour is more of a skill share that's generally, talkier, and people socialize a lot during it. So so consider coming for that, for a different kind of event. And then we also have a flyer online at papercutters.org, which is our website. And you could, if you can get the word out about our membership drive and just about the Guild generally, we would be very, very grateful. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we love to see people kind of pop in and keep up with us, and we will follow you back on Instagram for sure. Whether or not you're a full member yet, although we do hope that you're going to become a member. Showing you the page with the different membership perks. We promote you on Instagram. You get an artwork page on our page that links to wherever you want it to go. Subscription to First Cut, which is our beautiful and informative monthly newsletter, which goes out as a PDF every month by email. And you have access to First Cut archives back to 1988, which are really actually impressive. And there are a lot of great articles in there. And you have free access to virtual Crafty Hours events, as I said, and also discounted workshop for anybody can take workshops. It's usually $35, but for members, it's usually $29.75. And eligibility for member exhibitions. We do exhibits that are members only. We promote all kinds of stuff. And there's also an annual member gift, and you can get Gap logo stickers if you are a member, which are very cool. And I get 100 of them every once in a while for like $5, and I'm happy. You can just complete the form and pay by PayPal online. Even if you go to PayPal, you can still use your credit card there. So don't feel like you need to have a PayPal account. Okay, that's my spiel. Wendy is amazing. And I want to say 2 words about her. She's a longtime GAP member and incredible artist, visual artist and environmentalist living in Western New York. What's your city, Wendy?
I live near Jamestown, which is almost Pennsylvania. I'm right on the border in the bottom left corner.
Oh, cool. So, and in addition to paper cutting, Wendy works in a lot of different drawing media and occasionally paints. And she is kindly doing this workshop to spread the word about GAP.
Thank you. That was nice of you to say all those nice things, and I'm super happy to be here, and I want to welcome all of you. I'm so excited to see not only where we're all from, but Jerry did share with me the entry for the registration for this workshop, and you guys were asked the question to tell a little bit about yourselves, which I found fascinating. And so we have people that are in mixed media, we have paper cutters, we have bookbinders, we have painters, silhouette artists, we have traditional specialists, we have paper makers, we have calligraphers, we have teachers, we have hobbyists, we have installation artists, we have many GAP members, and we have many first timers. So I want you to understand that for this project that we're doing tonight, you don't have to have any special skills. You don't have to have drawing skills. You don't have to have ever cut paper before. This is something that is very, very approachable, and I absolutely love to teach it. And my favorite part about doing a workshop from the other end is when I actually get to get the scissors in my hand or the knife in my hands, and I'm getting to actually participate. So I promise you that we're gonna get through this first part where I'll go through the list of supplies and some substitutions that you can use if you don't happen to have exactly what I had on the list. And then I'll give you a couple of minutes to get it together, and then we'll dive right in and we'll get cutting. So let's talk a little bit about the first page here. I'm not gonna pull it up because I want you guys to be able to see over here. But this is the list of what you'll be needing today. The first thing on the list is the pattern itself. I just wanted you to know that I cut mine out because I don't have a lot of space to work with here, and I didn't really want to have that whole sheet of paper to be flopping around, but you can have yours. It's not necessary to cut it out. You can just keep it as is. You are going to need some sort of scissors. This is a pair of scissors that I particularly like because they're really easy on my hands. But if you might have noticed on the front cover of this piece, I have a big honking pair of Fiskars scissors that work perfectly fine for cutting these feathers. I actually did it with those just to make sure. And so I wanted this to be something that people could have just their household things and not feel like you had to go out and buy something special for this. An embossing tool, I have a couple of them here. This one's embarrassing because it's kind of grubby. It's got adhesive on it, but it is my favorite one. But both of these have grippy cushions on them, so I like them for that reason. They do come in many different sizes, and this has like a bigger ball on this end, and this has a smaller ball on this end. So that is handy to have. But if you don't have an embossing tool, an old dead pen, this is one that has no ink left in it, and it's a really nice ballpoint pen with a nice sharp point on it. This thing works great. And for some stuff, I actually like it better. So there's no reason why you have to have a specialized tool for that. And then just a pencil with an eraser is helpful. Not totally necessary. I'm going to show you a workaround where you won't really actually need that. And then a small piece of foam core. I'm going to be using black foam core tonight because it will contrast with my white paper so that you can see it, but this doesn't necessarily need to be black. It can be anything. You just want something to press against. If for whatever reason you don't happen to have foam core kicking around your house or your studio, you can use something like this is just an old catalog, or, you know, a phone book, if you happen to keep those around anymore. I don't even know if they publish those anymore. I don't think so, but they're handy if you have them. Any kind of a magazine or something where you can just kind of, the idea is you're using that to create some cushion when you're doing the embossing part. An acid-free glue stick. This one that I'm using tonight is one of those disappearing purple things, and I bought a whole bunch of these and was really unhappy with the purple. And then I discovered when I'm demonstrating, you can actually see where the glue is going. So maybe that's not so bad. So what else? If you prefer to work with a knife, I know paper cutters seem to be pretty particular about whether they're using scissors or knife. I'm not. I like using either one. Many projects I'm going back and forth between knives and scissors. I sort of use whatever works for me. But if you are really, really fond of a knife and don't really want to use scissors, then go for it. That will work just fine. This is my paper of choice. I'm going to be working with the Canson color line. It's just a very basic paper, but you can use pretty much anything we have that's kind of a midweight, like a cardstock, or not too heavyweight though. Be careful with that. When we're talking about feathers, it is helpful sometimes to know the terminology as to what parts are parts. The things that you need to know are the tip and the shaft, the downy barbs, which are down at the bottom, and then the parallel barbs. Those are really the only things that we're going to be talking about. There's not going to be a test on this. There's some more complicated Latin words in there. We don't need any of that. I just do think it's a little bit easier when you're talking about it to know which end is up. The other reference I want you to notice here is this is a photograph of a goose feather, and use it or a real feather or whatever reference you've got to notice the shape of these lines here, that they are not straight up like a Christmas tree. So you're going to want to get a little bit of curve into them. So following that little tip, that will help you to make a more realistic looking feather. If you really want to get into realistic feathers and you really want to do a deep dive into making a feather that would look like an actual bird feather, my best go-to that I can recommend to you is the Feather Atlas, which is a wonderful resource that has hundreds of different bird feathers. It's the flight feathers and the tail feathers of many, many different species of birds. You can look it up. You can find out what your feather is by looking at this. If you find a feather and you're trying to figure out what kind of bird it came from, or you can use it if you want to know what, red-bellied woodpeckers feathers look like, then you can go straight to that. And it's actually got the measurements on it, so you can grid it out and make a nice replica of it. And just as a reminder, many of you may or may not know that wild bird feathers are federally protected. Most of them anyway, unless they're game birds, or some birds that are considered vermin, like crows, which makes me really sad. But anyway, wild bird feathers are federally protected. And this happened after, in the early 1900s, late 1800s and early 1900s, it became fashionable for people to use egret and other bird feathers and in their clothing and hats and things, and they actually hunted them almost to extinction. So they came out in 1918 with an act that made it a federal offense to have any bird feathers or parts of them. But you can make your own feathers out of paper, guilt-free. And I'll show you how to make them so that you can fool people and make them think that you've actually got a real bird feather. This is just a little bit about me, which we've already talked about, but I did want to just point out that on the left-hand side there is my contact information. Feel free if you want to ask me any questions after the fact. I'm happy to correspond with you about that. I'd love it if you would check out my YouTube videos. You'll find a whole bunch of videos on various topics, and there are 3 of them that actually go through this process of making the feathers and then embellishing them. And then the 3rd one is about how to display them. So you can look at that. Follow me on Instagram, check me out, like me on Facebook, and that would make me super duper happy. So this is the actual step-by-step. If you decide you want to do this again afterwards and you need a little bit more step-by-step, feel free to use this. This should be helpful to you. But for tonight, we're going to simplify it and just take it down to these simple steps. Everybody hopefully has used that time to get together whatever supplies they didn't have ready beforehand. So you want to also think about, if you decide you want to do something with a water media like this one, this feather that I did, is on a drawing paper. So I try and be sure that I'm not using a drawing paper if I'm going to do a watercolor in it. But
Wendy?
Yes.
Allison was asking, are there paper cutting projects where you have to account for grain? Can you say a few words about that?
I actually don't pay too much attention to it for what I'm doing, because I don't, unless it's a really obvious grain that's visually going to affect the feathers. For me, it's not something I ever really pay too much attention to.
Do you work with things like paper with inclusions or anything like that ever?
Yeah, I do. Well, sometimes I work with a lot of papers that have really long fibers and things, but for this particular project and this type of thing, I really like to just use a kind of a simple paper and then add embellishments on it with the more complex papers. Ultimately, I mean, you can use whatever paper you want. You're going to take this pattern, and like I said, you don't have to cut it out. You can just put the whole sheet on there, because I'm going to show you a way to get around having to use the pencil. Like if you wanted to, you could cut it out and you could trace around it with a pencil, and then you could cut that out. But I don't like doing that, because then you have to erase the pencil lines, and that's kind of a pain. So you've got your foam core or your old magazine or whatever you're using. And then you've got your good paper that you're going to be using. And then you've got your pattern. And make sure that it's set up so that you don't fall off the edge, because if you fall off the edge, then it will sometimes poke through, and that's very disappointing when that happens. And then just take the edge of this, and you're going to go around the pattern. You can either follow the feather itself, or you can follow the black line that I provided. And then you can also, if you want, you can even go further out on this downy part here if you want to go real crazy with it. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is all going to get cut or torn, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to reposition because I picked kind of a small piece of foam core here. And the purpose of this is just to give you a line to follow that doesn't have to be erased, because you're going to be doing all sorts of embossing on here, but you want to kind of figure out how hard you have to push. It takes a little practice. On this outside outline, you can press really hard, because if you accidentally go through, it's not a big deal. And hopefully you can kind of see on here, I don't know how well that'll pick up on your Zoom, but you should be able to see that the line is on there. So you don't have to worry about about it having to be erased. But if you do that and you see that maybe your vision isn't as good as it could be or something, and you want to make sure that you can see that okay, if you prefer to do that with a pencil, that's fine. You'll just have to erase the pencil lines when you're done. So that's completely optional, but it's one of my favorite ways to do it. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut this thing out just on the end. Should say before I get into it too far, one way, if you like, is you can tear it out, particularly around that downy part at the bottom, the downy barbs at the very bottom part. That gives you a nicer kind of organic line right there. And then you can cut out however you want to do it here. It doesn't have to be too perfect because you're going to be doing stuff to it later that's going to alter this edge anyway. So I just try and kind of give it sort of a little rough cut. I'm going to go ahead and tear down here. And you'll see when you tear one direction, it does make it, it tears differently depending on the direction you do. And that may have to do somewhat with the grain too, but you can see which way you like it. And at this point, you don't really know whether this is the right side or not. So it doesn't really matter. But I want a sharp edge for the quill part of it. And then a soft edge down here for what will be the barbs, the downy barbs. The next part of this is the part that I really like to create sort of an organic shape on it. When you look at this real feather, you can see that it has a pretty clean edge on it. It's sort of clean, but then if you look at it really close, it's got little nicks in it because of those where the different parallel barbs are. So what I do to kind of replicate that in the feather is I do a little nick. And if you're working with a knife, you could do something similar, but with this, you're taking these scissors and you're getting right down into the as close to the fulcrum as you can. And you kind of want to get in there and then partly cut and then tear it. So you're kind of just nicking off a little bit. And you'll notice that sometimes it leaves a little piece hanging there. Don't worry about that. And if you like the direction it's going, if you like that shape you're getting, that's great. If you don't, sometimes I find if you flip it over and go the other direction, like maybe this makes more sense going this way. I kind of like it better this way for this one. And you'll see that it'll get these things. Sometimes I leave them, sometimes I cut them off, but I like to go all the way around the feather, except for kind of don't bother with the downy part because you're going to be doing something else there. So you can just do the main part of the vein and kind of just nick in there to get that little sort of almost like a serrated edge that you're going after. And this, it makes it look less cut out. It makes it look less like a piece of paper, and it starts to make it have that feathery shape to it. And then, like I said, if you want, you can either come in and trim these off, or you can pull them if you want. Just be aware that sometimes when you pull things, it doesn't go the way you want it to, or maybe just leave a few. And that gives it sort of that the beginning of featheriness. I'm going to stick it on here so it's contrasted for you. I want you to emboss where the shaft goes. Now, notice that this isn't going to be usually like straight up the middle of this thing. So you're going to take the pattern and take note of that direction, that curve that goes in there. And also notice that it's really fat at the bottom and it gets skinnier. So you can kind of do maybe like a double one at the bottom by the quill. And then when you get up to the tip of the feather, it should be almost non-existent. It's gonna get really, really tiny there. So one thing that you can do is kind of start it. I want the skinniest one of my embossing tools for this. I'm going to use this one. And if you want, you can go back to your pattern and trace that. That'll give you a nice even line without having to think about it too much. And then when you get up to the top, just do it again and kind of split it so that it turns into two. And then once you've got that on there, you can go in, and in this case, like if you happen to have an embossing tool that's got a fat end on it, that's handy to use for something like this, because you can come in and beef that up a little bit, because you want that to be, this is going to be the most raised part of the whole thing. And that's what's going to make it look like a feather. At this point, you probably want to decide which way you want it to go, because the way you do it is from now on, this is going to be the front. So then you take your two thumbs like this and sort of press in to along that line so that you're creating that center rib there. And just so you know, I also teach making leaves, and it's the same exact thing. Like if you're doing the ribs of a leaf, same deal. And this will create that sort of, you can take it down and squeeze this and have a little bit more shape. So that's gonna create your line, and you're gonna use that as a guide for the embossing you're gonna do in a moment. But I like to then take the embossing tool and kind of reinforce that again, just so you get that really sharp edge on there. You want it to stay, and you're going to probably go back and do this again and again throughout the process. And that's what I like about this paper, is it really takes a beating. You can really give it a lot of push, and it will behave pretty nicely without freaking out and breaking on you or tearing. What you should have at this point is essentially just a nice rib through the center there. And don't worry about it if it looks a little wonky, because when you get the next part of it, the embossing part of it is what's going to really sell this as a feather. Set up your feather on the piece of foam core or your magazine, whatever you're using, and then go back to your reference. So you're going to want to pay attention to what you're using as a guide, and think about how those lines go. And what I like to do is, in using that reference, in fact, I'm going to flip it over so that it's going the same direction as this one is. What I like to do is just kind of draw in some guides. So like at this part of it is like that, and here is kind of like that. And pay no attention to the parts where it's like folding over itself in the real feather. You just want to get the basic direction going, like up at the very tippity top, it goes up like that. And then some feathers, you'll discover these will have a different angle than these do. And you'll notice that in this feather, it's got a little bit of a swoop to it. It comes up and then over. So what I like to do is just kind of give it a little bit of a guide here, and then you'll be able to see that on the other side when you go back. You know, if you wanted to, you could put it on this side, but I just wanted it to match so that you guys would see it was matching. So when I go back to my front side, I can see those guides. And now I'm going to fill in all of them. And it's important that you start at the shaft here and go out. You don't want to go over it because this shaft is defining for you how you are going to have those go. And as I'm getting up here, I'm seeing this one's that's curving here. And I'm hoping you can see that because it's, I'm going to get a little closer so that maybe you can see it. Well, you certainly can see it on the ones you're doing because it should show up pretty well. You can give it a pretty hard push and give yourself a nice little line following those guidelines that you did. So if you see as you're coming up to the next guide that you put in and it looks like you're kind of going off and you're too straight or you're at a wrong angle, you can look ahead and kind of start to adjust your angle so that those line up. And you're just going to get all of those in there pretty close together. And you'll notice that you're not going to be anywhere near as close together as the real feather is. And you're certainly welcome to go back in and like put another one in between each one. I was doing a demonstration on this one time, and I actually worked for 8 hours on the same feather. And I just kept adding more and more detail to it and going in and making it finer and finer and finer. But I mean, typically I can do a feather like this in about 30 minutes. So it's certainly not necessary to go too crazy, but at the same time, you want to get it pretty close together and pretty even. You'll see how my feather is starting to curl like this. And that's okay. Don't worry about it when that happens, because you're going to come in and do some of this on the back side, which will make that lie down. And to some degree, you might want that curl. I'm not going to do too much with the bottom of this one. If you want, you can go ahead and fill it in with lines. But I'm going to actually show you how to do some embellishing on it, which would cover up any lines I'm going to make. So your choices here are to go ahead and put your lines in here, following the photograph or the photocopy of the feather, if you want to do that. But I'm gonna show you how to do it with adding another layer of paper on there. This would be the stage in which you'd kind of need to decide if you want to do any kind of painting on it. If you made this out of watercolor paper and you wanted to do some watercolor on it. I use liquid charcoal quite a bit. And sometimes I use that for creating different tones and textures on there. Most of the time I'm just doing straight paper. But this would, if you wanted to do that, this would be the time to do that. And now I'm going to flip it over on the other side and just put a few little lines in to flatten it out, because I like it to have kind of these undulating things going through like this, but I don't really like it to be curling up like that so much. I don't want it curling like that. I kind of like it to be a little bit flatter. So you can adjust that pretty easily by going on the back side and following your lines again, and that will just kind of flatten it back out. At this stage of the game, there's a number of different things I like to do with them. This is a whole box of these scrap packs, mulberry papers. And this came from Dick Blick. And you get like, this is probably 1.5 or 2 of them in there. I've used a lot of them, so it's probably 1.5 of them. So you probably get like this much. And you get all these different crazy papers. They're just, you know, a big variety. You don't have any control over what they are. It's like a little sample pack, but it's really fun for doing little projects like this. So I highly recommend either that, or if you have other mulberry papers, this is a great way to add things onto it. Normally I would pick like a white, because it's more like the down. Like here's one that's been watercolored, and then it has the white kozo on there that is creating this downy stuff here. And I also cut it on the outside of that, as you can see. This one has got just an ink pen, and that's the only other embellishment on it. But I typically don't do this. I did this as a demonstration, but typically I prefer them to just be the paper feathers like this. But for the purposes of this, I thought it would be fun to use this paper, because it's got the little speckles on it, which I thought would show up pretty well on the Zoom camera. And those things can be put in there. They look pretty fuzzy. They don't look that fuzzy though. If I wanted to go like really crazy, I could pick a paper like this or something else out of my collection that could go in there. And that could just get glued on there. I'm just gonna use this ugly purple glue. And I'm gonna just glue some of that on there. I'm actually rather liking this, but we'll put both on there, because that will give us another little layer of something that has a little bit more natural fuzz to it, because it's kind of hard to make the regular cardstock, or in this case, the color line paper. It's kind of hard to make it have that true fuzziness to it. So I just put a few layers of that on there to give it a little bit more fuzzy. So these papers, like I said, they come in a bunch of different colors. And if if you happen to be doing your feather in a different color, you can find something to match. Or, like I said, you are welcome to just cut it without the extra layer on there too. And if you happen to be knife cutting, you can do it like that. This would require a knife cut though. It's not something you'd probably be able to do very easily with scissors, although I've seen some amazing scissor skills with people at the Gap that I'm sure can do that just fine with a pair of scissors, probably a pair of sheep's shears. So anyway, now that we've got this a little bit of other paper on here, we can come in and get the scissors back in action here. And now we're going to start with some really, really, really close together cuts. And I'll give you a hint on this. If you're not experienced with cutting with scissors, is that if you brace your hand on the blade and steady it like that, it will help you to guide that in there. And I kind of cut out a few and then cut off one. It's kind of haphazard, but I do that because it will make a little gap in there so that you can actually see, because sometimes if you just cut them next to each other, it still looks like a solid thing. And also you kind of want to think about how this part of it will look in terms of whether they're too square. I don't usually use the tip of my scissors for much of anything, but I do come in with these and just kind of take off the square edges so that it has a nice pointy, more comes to a point instead of having it be squared off. So at this stage, and this is a really slow project, I have seen people try to do this really quickly and thinking that it would work better to go like snip, 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 but it doesn't actually work that way. It needs to be done kind of slow and methodically. and try to get as absolutely close together as you can, because this part of the feather is going to be the part that's going to want to look the fluffiest. And if you didn't want to do this kind of diddly cutting on this, you certainly could just put a fuzzy Kozo paper on it or something like that. But I kind of like getting those really, really close together in there. And pay attention. You'll notice the direction that these are going. They do kind of go in different directions, and they go across it too. So you can do that with your other layers. You know, I'm kind of going this way a little bit. I probably should have started not angling that way. So I'm going to correct my angle a little bit and try to get a nice fluff going here. The other thing you'll notice is that as you're cutting it this direction, the paper's wanting to come down this way. You might want to part way through, flip it over, and then do the same thing on the other side. And then you'll notice that your little cutout parts are now curling back this way. So it's kind of nice to have some go down and some go up. And because in this case I tore it, it's got already a nice natural edge to it. If you didn't tear it and you just cut it, that's fine too, but it will help, I think, if it has that already kind of cut edge. Now that's cut out around there. I'm gonna switch back to the other direction and cut that out that way. And then I'm gonna flip back so that they kind of undulate back and forth between the two. Whatever you're doing, don't cut too close to that center shaft. And you don't want to go all the way in there. You just want to go kind of around the edge, maybe 3/4 of an inch would be the most you'd want to go in. You wouldn't want to do too much because it will make the structure of the feather kind of flimsy if you go too close to the shaft. And now here I did these kind of further apart. You can go back in with its nice steady hand and cut in between each one to make them even tighter. Sometimes I want to just kind of use the tip and get those edges to be not so, make them a little more random so that they're not quite so perfectly trimmed out from the original cutout or tear out. And this side I did a little bit more hurried, so it's kind of a little bit more squared off. So I'm going to come back in and really give this some trim, some angle cuts in there. It's kind of like cutting hair, I would imagine. You want it to have that kind of random look just on this part, just down at the bottom. Okay. Kind of hopefully see that a little bit. Kind of want to make these little splits. You know how the actual feather will sort of split like this. You want to be careful not to do that much of a split with this, because then when you hold your feather up, this part will just kind of flop off and it won't have enough structure. So you have to modify that a little bit and maybe just do a split more about like that. And I like to do no more than 3 of these, but I think this sort of sells it as a feather. So what you do is follow your embossment. Let me see if I can get my embossment to show enough to, there we go. So I'm going to follow that embossment, and this part of it is kind of curved. So I'm going to come back in like that. And then next to it, I like to put just a few really, really, really close together little splits. And I like doing this on the back side because then they'll flip over to the front like that. And that really, I think, sells it as a feather. So I like to do about 3 of those. I'm going to do another one down in here because this part of it is a little boring. It doesn't have anything going on really here. So I'm going to do, in fact, I'm going to just cut a big chunk out of that like that. I always tell people not to pull that, but I just did. And then take your little tiny cuts really, really close together. And this one, I'm going to actually add some more embossment in there because it feels a little lacking in that spot. Not that you could see that, but so I've got a couple of splits in there. I'm going to do another one up in here. And they can be wherever you want them. You know, that's up to you. And you can certainly go closer in some areas. You know, like up here at the top, it's okay to be closer to the shaft. It's not going to hurt anything. But get your little, make that little gap in there. And then just do a few little extra pieces to really make it look like it's got those barbs in there. So that is, to me, what really will sell it as a feather. And the final step on making a basic feather like this is to shape it with your hands to kind of, you can use your fingers to kind of go over it like this to get it to go the direction you want it to go. And then really go back into this with your thumbs and get that center, because that's going to provide some structure to your feather. That's going to provide that extra stability to it. Another thing that you can do if you want to take it to the next step, I buy colored vellum like this. I get this from Amazon. It comes in like a whole bunch of different colors. But if you were to take, because I'm working on a white feather, I'm just going to use white to keep it consistent. But what you can do here is literally just cut out a piece of vellum to attach onto this center shaft. And then it can come down and replace part of this. You can like fold that back and see how you would want it, how far you would want it to go. And this actually, the vellum, and this is just, stationery store vellum. This is not like the old fashioned kind that was made from animals. This is just another thing that works for this is rock paper, if you're familiar with that. And you can put that in there as well. And that will give you this sort of, I don't know what the bird feather is actually made of, but that whatever that weird kind of see-through thing is, that is the that forms the quill. It has that kind of effect to it that reminds me of vellum. So I'm using my original pattern to cut that out. And I'll show you real quick how to put that on there. I like adding that on. Oh, okay. I happen to select one of my favorite papers. It's an iridescent one. That actually looks kind of cool. I don't know if you can see the iridescence in that, but that's an iridescent paper, which gives it another kind of layer of something going on. So for doing that, I'm going to cut off the end of this so that when this sticks out beyond it, it's just on its own and doesn't have the white behind it. There we go. So I've got my ugly purple glue that will turn into clear eventually, but you can use whatever adhesive you like. And then I'm going to line up the white with it. In fact, in this particular case, I've got these sort of extra long pieces right here. I could even just cut those instead of cutting them off. I could just make them part of this, part of the downy part at the bottom, and let them, you could move it up and have it flop over or something if you wanted. Kind of go with the flow with whatever the paper decides to give you. Okay. And then that's going to give you this nice, particularly if you get the if you get your embossing tool and put a nice embossment on that, it really does make it look, the vellum really will make it look a little bit more like the other material. I wish I knew what that was called. It must have some, there must be some.
Keratin. Barbara Stoop put it into the chat.
Thank you. I knew it. I always hate that when there's like, I know there's a correct name for that. I just don't know what it is, the keratin, right? Awesome. Okay. So that made the feather have, one more little layer of something to make it look more realistic.
When embossing for the feathers, not the barb ones, but in the upper part,
yep.
Let's say you started getting a little lazy and it starts looking a little too even, or not, it's kind of losing the curl. Is there a way to, correct it? Like when you were doing the cutting, seemed like you just cut diagonally and that would fix it. But embossing, it just seemed like, how do we fix the embossing if it's looking a little too uniform?
Well, you can go over it. Remember when I said I did one that I worked on it for like 8 hours? I kept going over and over and over the same thing. And, if you've got a tough enough paper that can handle that much abuse, you can just correct it, make it be the way you want it to be, and then just go over that. And I find flipping it over and doing something on the backside really helps, because it kind of gives it that little bit more undulation. Like in this case, I don't really have that. It's kind of wanting to, this one's wanting to curl up this way. And I mean, I can, let me go at one of these spots where I can go over it and change it out. Like I'm going to make this go kind of a different direction. This is actually was going this way, and now I'm going to go this way with it. And it actually doesn't look bad, because if you look at a real feather, it kind of has a crisscrossy sort of feel to it. It's kind of hard to see on this one because it's black, but it's got lines going both directions. So it doesn't hurt anything it doesn't have to be so perfect. You can change it in and put more on there, more lines on there, really go to town on it, and then flip it over and then do it again the other direction. And if for some reason, like if you have a piece of foam core that happens to have a hole punched in it somewhere, I have this happen all the time, and it will actually, I'll like punch through my paper. And it's not a big deal because you can then come back in and put one of your little splits right where that hole is, usually. Because feathers aren't perfect. I mean, they're, and they change up. I mean, sometimes they're like this and sometimes they're like this. And you can, if you punched a hole like right in the middle of it, you could go, okay, I'm going to make a hole here and then let it come back together here so that it wasn't screwing up the structure of your piece so much. But anyway, that's.
Laurie had a question. Have you ever made the actual feather out of vellum or rock paper?
Oh, funny, you should ask. Yes. Here is the actual feather made out of vellum. Vellum is really brittle and has a tendency to kind of tear a little bit. It's a little tougher to work with, but yes, the answer is yes on that. Do I have a rock paper one? Yes. Are you familiar with silk? This is such a fun paper. This is a paper that has a silk enhanced surface on it. So that's why it's nice and shiny like that. And then I have a vellum piece here. This is a sort of a metallic kind of shinier paper that it's just a cardstock. And with cardstock, I always try and pick ones that have a solid core. I've used a lot of different kinds of papers. One of my most recent ones, this is a copper foil paper. It looks like this on the back. It's just like a cardstock that has the shiny copper in it. That's a feather made out of the foil copper foil paper, which was really fun to work with. But I actually did another layer I did 2 layers of the fuzzy stuff. That's I put another layer behind it to get the extra fluff in there. And I gotta tell you, I really enjoyed doing this, and this was pretty easy for me because this was totally my wheelhouse. But all of this knife cutting through here, this is about, I don't know, 20 hours of knife cutting, and I have to bow down to you people that do the more elaborate stuff. All of this, I was like going out of my mind. So I have the utmost respect for you guys for doing that. So, but anyway, this is one way that I try to combine different styles of paper cutting. And so much of this is stuff that I have learned and been influenced by the Guild of American Papercutters. This is just a painted feather. I did this with nitrum liquid charcoal. It's possible to take something like this, paint it all out, and then cut it out, and then apply those same techniques that I just taught you to your painted feather. So you can kind of change up the order. If you're interested in doing craft type projects, this is just a card that I made, a holiday card that's the same feathers that we were just making on a little smaller scale. 1, 2, 3 feathers right there. And then I made the goose's head to stick on there. So you have this sort of easy to branch off into other things. So this is what we've just done. We've researched it. We've done our pattern design. We did our scissor work. We did the embossing and shaping. We talked a little bit about some embellishments. And now I want to talk a little bit about how to display them and what to do with them. So I've showed you a couple of little ideas there, and then stick around to the end. And then I have, as I promised, I've got a bunch of resources for some of my favorite sources for things that we can talk about too. This is an example of 3 things that I did using the feather atlas. So the piece in the middle is a wood thrush that I did this etching, and it was kind of lacking when I got it done. And I added the wood thrush feather to it, looked it up on the feather atlas, got the exact measurements of it, gridded it out so I knew how it was going to look, found a paper that was really, really close to the color, added a little bit of vellum on there to make that shaft.
So you're telling us that this feather right next to this bird that looks so realistic was made from paper by you?
Yes, this feather here is made out of I think it was like a charcoal paper that was in this kind of rust color. And then I added some maybe black or maybe some, I probably added charcoal because I use charcoal a lot to kind of pick up the embossment a little bit more so that it was more obvious. So that is using it there. This great blue heron feather that's on the left, I actually put in, I did a large, like a 24 by 20 charcoal drawing of a great blue heron. And then on the mat underneath it, I placed this horizontally. And people always look at it and go, but that's a real feather, which is always makes me feel really good because I love making these uber realistic ones and trying to make people think that they are feathers. I had a friend who had a bald eagle experience. She found a bald eagle feather, and it's really super illegal to collect those. You can't pick those up at all. But she wanted to commemorate it. So she went on, I told her about the feather atlas. She looked it up. And then she commissioned me to make a replica of the exact feather that she had found. So that thing's about 18 or 20 inches long. It's huge. And I did actually put a canvas backing on that because it was so large that the paper was not really going to be sturdy enough for it. So I used a little canvas to help it out a little bit. Then the next thing I really want to talk to you about is the idea of taking what you've learned from making a realistic feather and studying a feather and seeing how that feather looks, and then branch out and make it into something fanciful and put your own style into it and make it be as crazy as you want. And this one is also quite large. It's about 2 feet across. That has a whole bunch of knife cutting in it. And then I took silk paper and stuck it behind it and then embossed it out. So it kind of filled in the holes that were in there in the original cutting. And I tried to get lots of curly cues and kind of crazy, a little bit more fanciful kind of look to it. So these feathers were all, remember I told you about that one I spent 8 hours working on? That's the one on the right. And you would never know it. I mean, it doesn't look incredibly spectacular compared to whatever, but the point being that you can really put a lot of abuse to the paper, and it will put up with it as you're working on it. The one in the center has got charcoal applied to it to play up those embossments. And then the one on the left is very made up. This is not a real feather at all. All of these, I was trying very hard to come up with something appropriate for this piece, which I finally lit on this one, and I think it was successful because the woman who bought it said to me, after she bought it, she talked to me about it. She said, well, where did you get the feather? And what kind of bird is the feather from? And I said, I made it up and it's paper. She's like, no, no, that's a feather. I'm like, no, it's actually just paper. Displaying the pieces. This is not a feather, it's a whole bunch of feathers. There's 7 different types of white paper in this, including vellum, which was used for the branch that the green heron is on. Mostly what I wanted to explain about in this particular piece is the display. It's called Gallery Deep. It comes from Jerry's Artorama. And it is not a shadow box, but we turn them into shadow boxes. The spacer is actually screen molding in this case, because the screen molding matches the natural wood. But if I have a white frame or a black frame, I just use white or black foam core to create that space. And it's really only 7/8 of an inch deep. but this gives you enough room to get that bas relief type sculpture in there. My list of favorites. If you look on the blue stripe here, we can talk about these things a little bit. The Canson color line, 92 pound. Color line does come in a couple of weights. There's 150 pound as well, that I find pretty much too heavy for anything except backing sheets. I don't typically use that for doing paper sculpture. I have done some full on just knife cut pieces with that. And it really hurts my hands because it's just too thick. The Canson Mi-Tente is a wonderful paper that comes in many colors. I'm using that a lot right now. As I'm getting ready for the show that I'm going to be doing in the fall. I've been working with that because it's got a lot of these sort of autumnal colors that I'm going for that. Kozo or mulberry paper. I showed you all the little samples. You can get that just about anywhere, but I do like Dick Blick for those three kinds of paper, mostly because you don't have to necessarily buy a huge amount of them. You can buy a sheet or two, and it's not like you have to buy it in a big pack. Rock paper, which I know the Guild has talked about before. We've had Molly come and talk about their wonderful paper there. That's available from the Rock Paper store. It is a mineral paper that has it's calcium carbonate that they use to make it, and then it's got a proprietary binder in it that is probably some sort of a polymer, would be my guess. And that is a really great thing for making embossments. It's wonderful for really getting heavy duty embossing into it. And I love it. I'm a huge fan of that. If you look on my Instagram, you'll see lots of examples of me using rock paper. The So Silk paper I talked to you about before. That was this one with the shiny black feather. This stuff is remarkable. It's made in Italy, and it handles a little bit differently because it's very soft. It's a little thicker, but that silk coating on it just can't be beat. And there's nothing else out there like it that I've found. And those that, along with a lot of different colors of vellum and different weights of vellum, which is kind of fun to work with, are available from LCI Paper Company. And when you go there, don't freak out by the big requirement to buy 5 million pieces of something, because if you scroll down, they're like a stationery store, so people will buy it because they're going to do wedding invitations or something. But if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a thing that says order samples, and then you can order like one sheet, and it's not expensive. So I like that. I like that company. My favorite embossing tool is this Fiskars one. This has just been an old friend. I think I paid $3 for this, and that one is available from Amazon. And you'll notice that on the PDF that you got, I did hot link all of these, so you can actually click through right to these things if you look at that PDF that you were sent. The micro tip scissors I like a lot are the ones that I was using tonight. They also come in a traditional, closed loop kind of scissor too. I think it's really important to go back and forth and not be too stuck on a particular tool, because my hands get tired. So I often go back and forth between a knife, pair of scissors, a different pair of scissors, a different knife. Excel blades are my favorite. Those are the ones that I use, and I like that cushy one. That picture on the right showing the hot pink one is my brand new one, which I absolutely love. It's nice and easy to find. I'm not getting any kind of credit from any of these people for talking about their stuff. I'm just telling you what I like. The other thing that I want to tell you that I like, my favorite place to learn about paper cutting is the Guild of American Papercutters. So the feathers that you've made tonight are a form of paper sculpture, which is an offshoot of paper cutting. And as most of you know, paper cutting is comes in many forms, from contemporary to traditional, from all over the world, each with its own distinct look. And there's tons of information about different styles of paper cutting on the Guild of American Papercutters website, which is papercutters.org. So if you are not a member of the Guild, and we want you to know that you can be a member of the Guild. The group is incredibly inclusive and great for beginners. It's also great for experienced artists. I think people of any skill level can get something out of this. And even those that are just enthusiastic about paper or paper arts are welcome to join. You don't even have to be an artist. Here is the brochure that we were talking about, the little flyer that we made up to help us kind of explain all of the great things that you can get being a member of GAP.
Very far along.
Awesome. We've got a green one. Nice. My favorite color. Cool. Oh, and we've got the overachiever that's done 2 of them. Awesome.
Amazing.
Excellent. Let's see here.
They're really fun.
I love the stripes in yours, Melanie.
Yeah.
This is a snowy owl, I think it was.
Ah, excellent.
Ooh,
That does look like a snowy owl.
really realistic looking. They're beautiful.
Yeah, I like the panache in it. Lovely. How fun. Cool. So in an in-person one, at the end, we always take all of the feathers that we're working on and throw them in a big pile and take a big group photo of them all together. And I feel kind of bad that we're not able to do that tonight. So I was thinking that if you would send me a photo, you've got my email on that document you've got there, and just send me an email with a photo of your feather when you get it done. And I'm going to do, I do a newsletter every full moon. So it's called Snippets, and I will do a special issue of that with all of the photos that you guys send me.
I guess we'll also probably want to do some kind of highlighting in First Cut, like so you all might have your feathers published in First Cut as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I find if you cut really close together, it curls all by itself.
Isn't that awesome?
I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got some great long cuts in there. Those look beautiful.
Sometimes I do grasses like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do have to take out a triangle every once in a while to make sure it shows up.
Yep.
Take out.
This is so different than any of the paper cutting that I do. And it's been really fun because normally I'm super like planful and very careful. And this, usually I'm not so good at just freeing up, but this was really fun to just kind of go crazy and not worry about it.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Let me see your feather.
Well, this, I'm working on the second one. This is
wonderful. I love those cuts that you made that don't go all the way to the end, that are just on the inside cuts. Those are great. And look at how nice your embossment shows up.
Yeah, I think it's just the light. It's just the angle.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Really cool. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Always makes me happy when I see people having success with it.
I have a question about this paper I was using for the downy part.
Yeah.
You probably know, since like you're really good with paper. This was like lumped at my art store with the other rice paper, but I don't know if it is. So it's like kind of there we go. So it's kind of ropey.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of when I tear it apart, it frays really nice.
Nice.
But
That's perfect.
I just don't know like what it is. So, just curious if you might have an idea.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. It looks kind of similar to some of the tie papers that I've bought. But those long that was kind of like this paper that I was using with these
Yeah.
big long chunks in them that when you tear them, it really does look more like that downy part, and you can really get a lot of neat effects with that.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
So this isn't exactly what you had, but it's a similar veiny thing, and I still had the sticker on it. And this was specifically a Lokta paper, Lokta. So if you search for Lokta, you'll get similar textures.
Cool.
See, how awesome is that? And I know that, I mean, when I went through my little list of things that were my favorites, I mean, that was kind of one-sided. I was just telling you what I like, but I know, I mean, Jerry and I were talking the other day about this, that, you know, she had, what was it you had that, another source that you wanted to,
Yeah,
we were,
paper and ink arts.
yeah,
I just put it into the chat also.
perfect.
But there are a lot of places out there. I also put Thales in there, which is a Brooklyn store that specializes in bookbinding.
So happy to see so many new faces tonight. So I hope I see a lot of you come into our organization. I hope I get a lot of emails tomorrow saying that we have new members.
That would make us really happy. This is a surprisingly small organization, and I think that the intimacy of that is wonderful. That's part of what makes it great. But I also think that there's so much wonderful stuff here that I feel really strongly. That's why I wanted to do this tonight, was I just feel really strongly that people need to know about the wonderful resource this is.
This is Lori Moorhead, and I just wanted to concur on that. In fact, after our crafty hour, just last week, I guess it was, maybe longer ago, Wendy had told us about the colored vellum, so I promptly went out and ordered some, and I've been playing with it for other projects, but I took a little piece of it and did a little bit here. But yeah, I mean, it was really fun at every meeting I've been to, and that one in particular. This is my little purple vellum feather that I did. Yeah. And the tips are just wonderful, and the sharing, just like Wendy was saying.
I brought you up into better view so I can see it better now. Let me see that is pretty.
Thank you. And then I scored it on the reverse side, on the back, but when I score it, because it's the vellum, it really curves.
Right.
And it's so brittle, I don't want to try to press it back. So it's kind of cool. And then this is what I guess is the good side, but let me see, you can kind of see the scoring on that.
Yeah, a little tougher to work with. I think that's why I like the rock paper, because rock paper has the translucency, but much more forgiving because it's kind of plasticky and has that little stretch to it.
Kind of rubbery in a way.
Yes, yeah.
Because the vellum's plasticky, but plasticky in a brittle way, whereas the rock paper is like sort of plasticky, but in a rubbery way.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
And they're both useful for different things. I mean, I think it's important to have a lot of different things, particularly for the type of work I'm doing, where I combine many different kinds of papers to get the effect I'm looking for. I do a lot of birds and things, so the different feathers, I'll try and use different papers to get the sheen on some of them and, not on the others. And that contrast between dull and shiny is important to me. And also the sharp edges versus soft edges.
Well, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
This has been fantastic. And thank you, Wendy. And
Hey, my pleasure. This was fun. Thank you all very much. It was a pleasure. Go Gap. Good night.